Welcome to the Sometimes Spouse podcast. And today is Ask a Realtor. We are so lucky to have Victor Henry, who holds a real estate license in the state of Texas. He currently works for Commercial Market Exchange as a commercial tenant representative in the Central Texas region. Victor, welcome.
Thank you so much, Christy. I appreciate you having me on.
I am so excited because I usually interview residential realtors. So you're the first commercial realtor I've ever interviewed.
Okay, so I've got to set a good precedence for my industry.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So tell us your story. How did you end up being a commercial realtor?
Oh boy. Okay, so I'll try to make it as short and concise as I can. So I was in the insurance business for a while when I was in Houston, and I started working with a lot of real estate investors. So, you know, those guys always want good prices for their insurance to insure the houses that they buy as investments. And so I figured, hey, I got all these real estate investors as clients, as insurance clients. Why don't I get a real estate license? So that way, whenever I hear Joe wants to buy a house and Susie wants to sell a house, I can say, hey, Susie, meet Joe, and I could be the realtor and get a little finder's fee and all that stuff. So that was my plan.
Uh-huh.
And so fast forward, I ended up moving from Houston to the Central Texas region. And I didn't want to really get back into insurance. So I had the insurance license and the real estate license, met a guy who told me about commercial tenant representation. And I was like, I never really thought about that. I've never thought about an agent representing someone looking for lease space.
Uh-huh.
But I thought about my own experience when I had my real estate office, and like, okay, yeah, I kind of knew what building I wanted to be in beforehand, and I got a pretty good deal, but I didn't really survey the market in its entirety to make sure this is the best building at the best price in the best location. And so when the guy explained to me what he does, I'm like, well, you know, based on my experience in finding my own office, it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So in 2009, I started representing commercial tenants, and I've been doing that ever since.
So for like 11 years then. So you are definitely an expert in real estate.
Well, I've seen a few things come and go a few times. Let's say that.
And that was an interesting time to get into real estate in 09, right after, 08 hit.
Yeah. And also think about this, being in a totally new city. So I didn't really have a lot of connections here. And so it took a little while to get my bearings in the business, understanding the nuances of representing tenants and meeting people, but then, establishing myself as being known as a commercial tenant rep realtor.
Yeah, because that's totally different than what I expected once I got to know you a little bit. That's a little different than just selling commercial real estate, right?
It is very different. We are dealing with a lot of people who are business owners, and, a lot of times startups go into lease space. They don't have the money to go and buy a building, or, they don't have the experience to say, I want to buy a building and, without knowing if my business is going to succeed. So yeah, the experience with that is with a lot of small and startup and newer businesses.
Interesting. So you moved from Houston to Austin. What kind of hobbies do you have? I mean, Austin is just the most unique city around. I love it. You got music, you have the bars, you have the outdoor life, you have racing, like you have everything in Austin. What kind of unique hobbies do you have down there, Victor?
Children. Anything my kids are, so we actually live in Hutto, which is a little bit northwest of Austin. So we're kind of in the extended suburb, as I would describe it. But I guess right now my hobbies, we have gone on since COVID. we have gone to like 5 different state parks, including one not too far from you,
Oh, yeah.
Mother Neff. We went to Mother Neff State Park about 3 weeks ago. So we
Oh,
do a lot
yeah.
of hiking, yeah, as a family, you know. And I guess driving is another hobby of mine because I'm kind of the designated driver when we're going all these places. So, but you know, driving kind of relaxes me too. So,
Yeah, it sounds like my husband. I don't drive anywhere. And now the kids are like, Mom shouldn't drive. It should just be dad.
right.
But Mother Neff, it is a nice state park. I forget about going to state parks. They're all over Texas.
There, yeah, we actually have the annual pass where it's like $70 and we get in the parks, I think free, and you know, and just preparing to like we're going to Possum Kingdom Lake or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
We're going there, and then we're gonna be big time in a few weeks. We're going to Monahans where the sand dunes are.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Yeah, so I guess that's my hobby. My hobby is going to state parks with the kids and you know, doing those outdoorsy kind of things. We got hiking boots and all that other stuff.
I bet the girls just love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we kind of get out there, you know, if you get out there too late and it starts getting hot, you know, kids start to complain. So,
Yeah.
but I think for the most part, they like it. Mother Neff was a good park because along the trail, they have placards that'll tell you about certain plants or the area, which was a little different than some of the other parks. So my 11-year-old really liked that.
Oh, wow. So tell me what the difference is between a commercial real estate agent and a residential agent, because a lot of people listening might not know the difference.
Okay. Well, in the state of Texas, we all hold the exact same license. So there's no differential license requirements. Really, it's what you're going to focus on as your area of, I guess, expertise. So for a commercial agent, we obviously focus on those properties or those clients or those things that would uh, be determined to be a commercial situation. Whereas someone that's a residential agent, they want to more so deal with houses and home buyers and sellers or apartments or apartment locating.
Okay, that is great to have that kind of definition. And you even go kind of into more of a niche than most people do, because I'll talk to realtors all the time and they're like, well, I do it all. And so
Yeah,
I'm like, what does that mean? And they're like, well, we do buyers and sellers and commercial. And I think like you're doing everything. You should just really niche it down. And you're one
right.
of the very few people I've interviewed that you've got it niched down so you know exactly who your target market is.
Exactly. You know, and when you do that, you know, as you get enough transactions under your belt, they become second nature to a degree.
Uh-huh.
So in any lease, any commercial lease, I know probably the 6 general provisions that's going to be in that lease somewhere. The state of Texas does not have a promulgated commercial lease form. So that means your landlord could write on a napkin what he wants you to, the lease agreement if you wanted to, right? Most of the time, there is a form that realtors can use from the Texas Realtors Association, but a lot of times the landlords I deal with have their attorneys, they have forms they draw up. And if you think about it, if they're going to pay their attorney $200 or $300 an hour to draw up a lease that they could have used a form that exists, whose side is it going to favor, right? So,
Exactly.
and that's the reason why it's important to use, you know, to engage a person that's representing your side of the transaction.
Yeah, that is so important. You're right. Because when you write a contract, if I have my attorney write a contract, it totally favors me.
Right.
Yeah, it's
Exactly.
looking out for my interest, not somebody else's.
Right. And so what we do is we try to balance it off as much as we can. You know, there are going to be some things that, you know, you just can't get around. But again, number one, knowing those key bullet points that exist typically in any lease. And secondly, even if it's something that I can't you know, get changed in the lease, I can advise my client that, hey, you know, this provision says if the full moon is on a Thursday night, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
This is what's going to trigger that, right? So at least we can give them some insight as to how that works in the lease agreement.
That is amazing to know that there's somebody out there, because I've signed lease agreements before. I didn't know that there was people out there that would protect my interest when getting a lease.
Right. Yes, there are. And the important thing for me is I try to sit in the place as if that business owner hired me and I'm the VP of real estate for his company. Now, that person may be a one person operation, you know, a small business that doesn't have the budget to hire somebody like me, like as if like Starbucks. I'm sure there's a VP of real estate that sits in Seattle and
Yeah.
looks at all their leases and make sure they're protected. Well, that's the same kind of relationship I like to have with my clients, that I know can't afford that, me to be on their payroll, because that way I can engage with them throughout the term of that lease and find out, okay, are we growing? Are we thinking we're going to downsize? Are we going to look for a second location? Um, you know, are there some, you know, maintenance things that we probably need to address with the landlord, even if we are supposed to pay for them? There
Uh,
could be a strategic time that you can leverage that and maybe get the landlord to pay for those things.
I didn't know landlords didn't pay for that, because mine does.
Well, if you're in the, depending on your type of lease, you're probably in an office space, right?
We have a whole building.
Okay. Yeah. So like, for
Though.
instance, if you are in a, you retail is a good example.
Uh-huh.
You know, in retail, most of the time the landlord is going to make it where you, Mr. or Miss Tenant, you're going to pay for the HVAC. Yeah,
That is so expensive.
it is very expensive. And in Texas, can you go without your HVAC?
Not if you're a
No.
retail company, no way.
Right. So I've negotiated leases where, you know, I made the landlord warranty the HVAC for the first 60 days. My client moves in and finds out that 2 units were bad. So just that language alone saved us $11,000,
Wow.
right? Because it was on the landlords. They were on the hook for the first 60 days. So again, those are just things that, because of my experience in looking at all these leases for the past 11 years, I kind of know what to anticipate, or the things that I'm going to try, you know, to leverage in a lease agreement.
Wow. So, how has the pandemic affected commercial real estate?
Well, I'll speak from two perspectives. From the buying perspective or the investor perspective, what I hear is banks are just wanting more, you know, money down on those investment properties, or commercial properties. If you think about it, every commercial property is an investment property.
Uh-huh.
Um, and sometimes the underwriting and the deals take longer to finish. Now, on the leasing side, especially from the perspective of a tenant rep agent, what I'm seeing is, on new leases, landlords are probably giving more incentives, or a little more flexible on the incentives, just a little,
Uh-huh.
of getting you in. So maybe they give you a little more free rent or reduced rent up front, because they know, you know, people's businesses are reduced because of COVID. However, I still find that they still eventually want to get the market rate that they are advertising. And that's because landlords figure into the income of a property a capitalization rate, a return on investment rate that they want to get back from that property. So if they have to push that down the road a little bit, they still want to get that, you know, return from the money that they are inputting into that their location.
Now, I've got several friends that have went out of business because of the pandemic. So,
Mhm.
if somebody does have a lease, what are some opportunities that they would have instead of just breaking that lease?
Well, first of all, in COVID, please, I would suggest be very proactive with your landlord. Let them know what's going on, because if you think about it, there's not a line of people waiting to sign leases right now. So if they, kick you out of the space, it's not like they are going to have somebody that can come in and take over that space. So being proactive with the landlord is the first thing. The other thing, and I read up on some stuff. The other thing is trying to, maintain as much liquidity in your cash, I guess, as you can, just as a emergency type situation. The third thing though is if you absolutely think that, hey, this is just not going to work for me. Number one, figure out if you need to either downsize. So that's going to happen a lot in office space. A lot of companies are going from a come to work every day to a virtual platform. So now instead of needing 5,000 square feet of office space, we really only need 3 offices, right?
Yep.
Yeah, but we're on the hook for, a lease for 2 years. So there may be a company that's out there looking for the amount of space you're trying to give up. So you can sublet part of your office, or there may be somebody that will take over that office in that space and that lease entirely. So subleasing is a very important tool that you can use to mitigate any kind of loss. Because if you people need to realize this, getting locked out is only half of the equation, because your stuff is also locked in.
Yeah.
Right. So all your equipment and furniture and all that stuff is locked on the other side of the door. So, you want to try to be ahead of that situation as much as you can.
So will you explain to my audience what exactly subleasing is? I know we did it in the very beginning of Sometimes Spouse. We actually subleased out because we got this big building and we only needed a couple offices. So will you explain what that is? Because it seriously could save someone's business.
Right. So subleasing is when a tenant is responsible for a lease and they wish to bring in a second tenant to occupy part of all of that space throughout the remainder of the initial term. So there's what's called a master lease, and then the sublease tenant would be in a sublet situation. So it could be that you don't need all the offices, all the rooms again. So you could sublet out part of the space, or you can actually find somebody that comes in and takes over that lease in its entirety. The other thing about that too is, let's just say if you need to sublease the entire office, but your plan is to regroup yourself, and you believe that the market is going to rebound for your industry. Well, you could sublet and let somebody finish out your lease term, and then at the end of the lease term, you're still the master tenant. You still have the rights to that property. So then you could renew that lease. Now that's a lot of moving parts, because then you got a subtenant. But most subtenants understand that a lot of times those are temporary locations. So the benefits for a subtenant is, most landlords probably want at least a 2 and probably a 3-year lease. So if I can go out and sublet for 10 months for a new business while I'm getting my business going, that may be a great opportunity for that subtenant, because they don't have to commit to a 3-year lease without the uncertainty of what their business is going to do. And then for the master tenant, it obviously alleviates them of the financial obligation of paying that rent in a space that they can't afford, or have some situation has changed for them.
Wow. I remember when we started, we couldn't afford the massive kind of lease that we had, but we wanted the building because we knew it was an opportunity. So we only needed a couple offices. So there was this room, it was just like an empty room, and it was probably, 40 feet by 100 feet. It was huge for us. And so we subleased it to a church, and they only used it on the weekends, and during the week they put all the rattlesnakes away so none of our people would see them, and they actually paid the rent for the entire building by subleasing, and then we just used it and paid the utilities.
Yeah. So again, that's a perfect example where subleasing worked for 2 parties. They got what they needed and you got what you needed, and it was a great relationship. the one thing you have to be aware of is landlords have the right to approve the sublease. And it's kind of backwards. They make us go out, find a sublet tenant, get them to agree to the sublet terms, and then we have to present that to the landlord. So we go through all this, you know, process
Uh-huh.
where a landlord could squash the deal at the last minute. But most likely, you know, we're gonna know what kind of tenant. And up front, what I would do proactively, as if I was representing the sublease, I would at least let the landlord know, hey, we're, you know, planning on subleasing, and this is the potential tenant and their use, because that's mainly the thing that would disqualify that in financials. But you know, the use could disqualify a sublet tenant. So like if I'm in an office building and somebody wants to sublease for a bar, of course that's not gonna work. Even though it'll be nice, you know, get to right after work you go get a drink.
Yeah. Instead of going to Starbucks, go to the bar.
Yeah.
So I know that some of the offices or the places that we looked at were pretty scary when we were wanting to get our lease for sometimes spouse. And I remember walking into one and I swear there was a chalk outline from the person that was killed right before. And like there was just, it felt like stuff was crawling on the walls. Like it was terrible. So as going and representing those people that are going to get a lease, what are some things that they should look for that are major red flags, like, you know, a chocolate outline of a body?
Yeah, or if the body is still there.
Yes.
So, and I hate to say this because it sounds kind of self-serving I don't want to sound like a sales guy, but landlords that don't hire agents to represent them. And the reason I say that is because um, I've had a 50-50 experience in that situation.
Uh-huh.
Normally they are not the best landlords because, you know, if they're not going to spend the money to have somebody property manage and, you know, and it could be done if it's a small, you know, if you got a small office or something. But I'm just saying the red flags have been for lease by owners. You know, um, if there's a lot of vacancy all the time in a building, and I even encourage my tenant clients that, hey, if we're considering a building, go talk to the current tenants, ask them questions. You know, how responsive is the landlord? Is it a good place to be in? Have you been here long? What is the parking situation? You know, parking that can cause the neighborly fights, right? Um, you know, so those are, you know, just some of the kind of small things that are kind of obvious that you would be like, hey, you know, something's kind of weird with this building. Forgive me, my lights are flashing because it is raining here.
Oh, it's fine. It's good. Now, I know when we were looking for one that we wouldn't have to build out. Now we have built it out since the church left. It's a, you know, a lot more user friendly for a handyman and cleaning business.
Mm,
Also one that's clean.
yeah.
I
Now,
don't really want to move into something where I'm going to have to clean.
well, I tell you, the other thing too is on the flip side of that, I have mentioned in our meetings that, hey, I'm looking for second generation restaurants or second generation daycares, or so something that's already built close to the need that you for your business.
Uh-huh.
So restaurants is a great example. You know, once a restaurant space is built, that grease trap and vent and all the, you know, some of the equipment and stuff is always there. So
Yeah.
instead of you, tenant, Mr. Tenant, having to pay for that stuff, it's best to find a restaurant, place that was already a restaurant. It's going to already, you know, it's going to permit already for a restaurant. You know, it's, you know, now the challenge sometimes though is if the previous restaurant had a bad reputation,
Yeah, I bet.
you know, so that could be a challenge, and that, you know, it can happen, especially when you're in smaller cities and it's kind of people know, you know, Joe's hamburger sucked, and now you're putting another hamburger joint there. So, you know, you got to be leery, just a little cautious of those kind of situations. But second generation spaces are the best whenever it's as close to, you know, what you need it to be as a tenant, because sometimes landlords don't want to pay for those tenant improvements.
Definitely. Now, when you're saying that and you're talking about restaurants, that's the interesting thing. Like, well, McDonald's, it's not just a burger place, right? It's all about the real
Yeah,
estate.
it's
So,
all
do you
about the real estate.
represent people that go in and buy a McDonald's, or,
Not necessarily a McDonald's, but my one of my first conversations with my tenant clients is, eventually you want to be the landlord, you want to be the building owner,
uh-huh.
you know. And so I try to give them a game plan, and that may be a 10-year process or longer. But think about it: if you're going to pay rent somewhere, if your business is going to produce income, and part of that is rental income, why not let it be mortgage income?
Yeah.
And so then when you get ready to retire and ride off into the sunset, and you want to sell your cleaning business or your restaurant or your, you know, whatever it is, you can sell the business, and most likely, depending on what type of business it is, the new owner is going to keep the business in the building that you own. So now you got rental income, passive rental income from a building that the business basically paid for. Your business paid for the real estate. Just like in the, I think it was the movie The Founder, they told Ray Kroc he wasn't in the real estate, he wasn't in the burger business, he was in the real estate business. So that's what it is. It's letting the products and services pay for real estate, because industries change, right? There may be a time where, you know, certain types of industries aren't as feasible, you know, but if you got real estate's gonna always be here. Somebody's gonna always need somewhere to put a business.
Exactly. So now, in the current market conditions with real estate, I have twofold question. One, what do you see happening over the next 6 to 12 months with this pandemic, and commercial real estate? And also, currently, are there opportunities in commercial real estate?
So I'll answer the first one. Yes, in any type of down market or potential down market, there's always some opportunities. And what most likely happens is cash is king.
Uh-huh.
So cash buyers are the ones, and it's amazing that there are cash buyers that buy multi-million-dollar properties. Some of them may be doing what's called a 1031 exchange, where they sold the property and they have to place the money somewhere else. Um, but yeah, cash buyers will seek out those opportunities. There are going to be a few landlords that, you know, even before the pandemic, they were kind of in the red in the first place, and then a few of these new vacancies just put them in a situation where they need to get out. So yeah, there's opportunity now. What I foresee is, you know, that it's going to be market driven and specific to certain product types. The hospitality industry is going, you know, it's probably going to be a little weak. Hotels, restaurants, retail is probably going to suffer a little bit or a lot. Office space is going to make a transition, but warehouse space, e-commerce, anything like that,
Yep.
there's a surge that's happening in that sector. Um, Amazon is building a 3.8 million square foot warehouse in Pflugerville.
Wow.
They have also just leased 450,000 square feet, no more than 8 miles from that location. And they've also leased a warehouse down in Kyle. So
Yes.
businesses like that are flourishing, you know. Um, so it just kind of depends on what sector you're in, how well you're able to pivot. Like us, you and I we're taking our businesses virtually.
Yes.
Um, and so that's going to be the biggest thing. And so, yeah, certain markets, certain sectors are going to rise, and some are gonna have problems.
Well, Victor, I have enjoyed this interview. It was absolutely amazing. You've really opened my eyes to several opportunities in commercial real estate. But I want my listeners to be able to get a hold of you. How can they contact you, Victor?
Well, good deal. So our company is the name of our company is Commercial Market Exchange. The website is cmeatx.com. And my phone number is area code 512-587-9409.
Awesome.
They can call me, text me, reach out through our website, and we'll be happy to talk through whatever questions they have.
Now, before I end my interviews, I always like to ask a fun question. Victor, if you were stranded on a desert island and all of your human needs were met, and you can take 2 luxury items, what 2 luxury items would you take on the island with you?
Luxury items.
Yeah.
And I'm stranded, so I can't take a boat.
I mean, that could be your luxury item.
I may take a boat just because if I wanted to get off the island and come back on, and I probably would need maybe just a cell phone because I could do TV and all that stuff from that. So, those may be the 2 things I would take.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the Sometimes Spouse podcast, Ask a Realtor. I would love to have you back another day. I only asked a few of the questions I wanted to ask. You were just full of knowledge. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me, and I will definitely enjoy. I welcome being invited back.
Thank you. Thank you guys for listening to the Sometimes Spouse podcast. This is Christy Ogle, the host of the Sometimes Spouse podcast, and that was Victor Henry, a commercial real estate agent on Ask a Realtor.